Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fat Muscle Project podcast. I'm John Gorman, your host, joined once again by Miss Lisa. Lisa, what's going on? How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How have things been going for you?
Good. We've had more warm days. I'm in Missouri. If you're a hillbilly, that's what it's called here, Missouri. Um, it's been dipping down into the 40s, not bad. I've been getting my nightly walks in for 20 minutes for heart health, and I do those later at night, like usually about 9 or 10 o'clock, because that's my day is winding down and it's nice and relaxing. I can go for a walk and listen to podcasts and just clear my head. So it's been colder, so I just dress warm and roll. But other than that, things are good. I know we've got a couple wins for the week that we like to pass along, and what I like about that is it causes other people that are listening to think about their wins for the week. So if you're a listener, always try and like each day, like focus on, okay, hey, this was a big win for the day or a win for the week. At least let's start off with you. What do you have?
Yeah, so I'm back in Colombia now. Last time when we recorded, I was in the States. Now I'm back in Colombia. And I just took new progress pictures or sort of like comparison pictures since I guess I have shared before. I sort of started focusing on like glute gains, etc., about a bit over a year ago, September 2022. And so in those, let's say 15 months, I'm excited to share the pictures in a couple of days, just because it really is a big difference, very visible and also for me noticeable in terms of like training and so on. So yeah, that's a big win for me because sometimes if you're in that on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, it feels like nothing is happening and you're just like,
Yeah.
am I actually making any progress? But then if you have, 15 months apart, you're like, oh wow, that is a lot. So yes, I'm excited.
Yeah, that's a big deal because, for people listening, seeing fat loss pictures and progress, that's huge, right? And you can see a decent amount of progress pretty quick, when it comes to fat loss. If you're losing 1 or 2 pounds a week, some people are losing more, especially as you get leaner, you really see the drastic changes, like every 4 weeks. Now, if you're trying to see muscle gain in 4 weeks or sometimes even 4 months, it's such a long process. And the shorter your frame, the more you're going to be able to see it. I've noticed you're not how tall are you?
What is that in inches? 5'4", I think,
Okay,
something like
yeah.
that.
So like a lot of females are 5'1", 5'2" seems to be a
Mhm.
pretty common but for people a little bit taller than that, it just takes more to fill your frame out. So I know it's been one of your goals just to keep hammered down, eat a ton of food. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see your progress.
Yeah,
So
and especially since at the same time the goal was also to still stick with the quote unquote lean gaining and not making it, just a huge bulk and then putting on more body fat than anything. But it's very visible that it's not just body fat.
yeah, and I think our topic today is all about we're going to do a deep dive on fat loss plateaus. I think at some point we should do a deep dive on muscle gain plateaus. You don't hear
Mhm.
people talk about that often and what to do to break those plateaus. So, yeah, real quick for me, my win for the week. We are just about, let me think about when this is going to drop. We're recording in mid-December. This will probably drop after the beginning of the year. We had a heck of a Fat Days of Christmas for the business for Fat Muscle Project, and that was fun. Um, and just wrapping up the year, our year has just, we've grown, like we're up like almost 20%. And it's just good. And we're about to have our Fat Muscle Customer Appreciation event, which, as we're talking right now, I've got 4 tickets left. Those are going to sell out. So we're going to have the biggest event that we've ever had. And we're going to celebrate our coaches, our top customers, our top retailers, and just basically what it is to be part of Fat Muscle Project, which is, we're all building our Fat Muscle Project, our best physique. So, that as that wraps up and the year wraps up, I guess that's just my win. Like everything is just in such a good place. We have a new headquarters that we're moving in that's twice the size. Just very, very
Wow.
blessed and fortunate. So, we're gonna get into this. How am I doing on my end? I know my Wi-Fi is a little spotty. Am I breaking up any at all over there, Lisa?
It's been a little blurry a couple of times, but not broken up completely.
Okay, yeah, that's just the podcast life, right? You've done a great job of putting this together. I'm gonna let you take the reins here and let's get into fat loss plateaus.
Yeah, John, like you were saying, topic is fat loss plateaus and essentially anything or everything associated with that. And first, I want to define what actually constitutes as a plateau, because sometimes people have the same weight for like 5 days and they're like, oh, I've reached a plateau. And you're like, no. But yeah, maybe you can define, or what would you define as a plateau?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Weight loss, fat loss in our world, physique enhancement, everyone listening here, you're trying to be your leanest, most muscular physique, as I've said. And weight loss and fat loss usually are going to be intertwined very closely. Okay. The only time that you're going to see someone strictly worried about fat loss and not so much the scale is typically when someone first starts out and they haven't been training for a long time and they're kind of new to training. They can gain muscle faster than normal and they're going to lose fat at the same time. We call it recomping, right? So essentially, you see people drop inches, and I see it all the time. And sometimes that'll happen too if someone's taken a long time away from training and dieting and taking care of themselves, and they come back after 5 years off or 10 or 20 years off. Maybe they worked out in high school, but then 20 years later, now they're close to 40, and they want to get into shape. Well, they start training again and they start dropping inches, but they're not really dropping scale weight. We do see that, right? But the reason I bring these up is because when we go to look and we talk about the nuances between the two, we'll get in more into the weeds and the nitty gritty. But basically, a plateau is you're simply not making progress. So from the fat loss, the weight loss side, what I look for in a client is, are they not dropping inches, first of all? And typically the scale's not moving because most people, if you're going to lose a pound of fat, you're going to lose a pound on the scale. Like that's just the way that is, especially the more seasoned you are. If you've been working out for a year or more, you're probably not going to be recomping. So if you're going to drop weight, you're going to drop fat. So I like to watch for, at least a pound of fat loss a week, sometimes two if someone's a little heavier. And if they haven't lost anything and the scales just kind of stayed the same, like maybe it's 134s for the last 10 days, or it's averaging 134. That to me as a coach, now I start to dig. Now I start to find out, okay, which we're going to do, what's causing the plateau. If you're not dropping inches, that's another thing. If we're looking at pictures, there's not really a change. We'll talk about those, but essentially everything has come to a halt, and there's a lot of things that cause a plateau, and I know we're gonna deep dive into that as well.
I do think you mentioned something really important, and that the weight is averaging XYZ, because
Yes.
sometimes if people just look at day-to-day scale movements and then the scale goes back up, and they don't consider things like hydration, sodium, even just hormonal stuff, that's just, we don't want to be focused on day-to-day scale movements. So I usually say weekly average, but even there, if it's just the same for 1 week, who mostly worked with Gen Pop, I hardly ever would do an adjustment if that's for 1 week, if it's the same as the previous week. If 2 weeks in a row, nothing is happening, and on top of that, people are not feeling leaner, are not making other progress or so, then maybe after 2 weeks, I'll adjust something. Of course, I think it also depends on what kind of deadline do you have? Do you have a deadline or not? Like for, again, Gen Pop, or if someone has a lot of weight to lose, I think we can be a bit more patient, or other people can be more aggressive. Like if you have a show to attend in 18 weeks and nothing is happening for 1 week, that's a big percentage out of the whole, and you want to move things along quicker. But with Gen Pop, where we're just like, okay, and we want to work on healthy habits and everything at the same time, yeah, hardly ever will I adjust something after just 1 week of a plateau. And we'll talk more about how to ask yourself more questions, in the sense of, should I be adjusting something already, or should I be more patient, in a little bit as well. But yeah, first I want to talk about why these plateaus actually happen. So maybe you can explain that to us. And we've talked a little bit about that in our episode on reverse dieting. But generally speaking, why do weight loss plateaus happen?
So it's a very natural thing to happen. And what I'm about to say, I remember the first time I ever read this was back in 2007. I was reading a book called Body Opus by Dan Touchain, and this made a lot of sense. And he was talking about, okay, listen, your body has to slow its metabolic rate as you lose weight, especially as you're losing muscle. Or the other reason is as the muscle becomes flatter, right? So like when you're dieting on, you lower your carbs to diet for most people, the muscle cells are going to be a little bit flatter. They're not going to be as full. So when you're dieting, what you will see is as your weight starts to drop, especially over time, your metabolic rate is dictated by mostly muscle, right? Body weight and mostly muscle. So as that stuff starts to slowly go down, if your metabolic rate didn't also slowly go down, your body temperature would rise. Well, that's not going to happen. So it's literally a built-in checks and balances system to where when you get lower, when you get leaner, your metabolic rate has to adapt. And that's why when, say if you're a female and you start out dieting on 1600 calories, right? Pretty common to start out 1600 calories. After a while, if you drop 10 pounds, 12 pounds, whatever, I don't know, whatever the number is, now all of a sudden you're doing the same cardio, you're eating the same 1600 calories, maybe with a free meal, which we'll talk about, or a refeed, but then everything just stops and you're doing everything perfect. Your training's perfect, your diet's perfect, you're still eating 1600 calories. Why do you stop and plateau? Well, you're 10 or 12 or 15 pounds lighter. So your body has actually adapted not just to the calorie load, but it's also had to slow down because you weigh less. And that's why it's very, very important to be aware of that. And it's a common thing. I've got clients that freak out over, they're so worried about stalls. I'm like, hey, a stall is normal. That's why you have me. That's actually what you're paying me for. My biggest job as a coach is to know when to adjust to break the stall, when to anticipate a stall's coming, and how to kind of stay ahead of it. But we're all going to hit stalls. I would imagine when I diet someone for stage, I'm at least going to see 3 stalls for most people that I'm going to break. For Gen Pop, we're going to talk about how to fix that because there's a lot of things we can tighten the reins on, which yeah, I know you're going to smile as soon as I say that. There's a lot of lifestyle stuff we're going to tighten the reins on, and we're going to make those stalls go away without dropping calories. But that's pretty much it. I wanted people to understand like why it's normal.
And I think too that breaking it down a little bit further in the sense of how your metabolism adapts to that is helpful for people to understand, because it's not just, you mentioned you're technically doing the same in the gym, etc. But even there, so first of all, when the metabolism adapts, you consume less food. So generally the thermic effect of food is going to be lower. You're probably going to have a lower NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis after a while. Your body just down regulates, kind of goes into power saving mode in every aspect. And even though you might feel like you're putting in the same effort in the gym, you probably don't have quite as much energy available as you did at the beginning of the cut or at maintenance. So even though you feel, or even your numbers might be the same, it might not be as intense. And then of course, basal metabolic rate, as you mentioned, that's the main thing that adapts as well. But I think in a lot of people, NEAT is really one of the main movers, and there are more and more studies actually showing like how adaptable NEAT really is between maintenance, beginning of a diet, end of a diet, etc. So yes, as you said, it's just natural. It's going to occur. That's just what we have to deal with.
Let me bring up one more point, and this is the role that cortisol plays, and a lot of people don't realize, but this is why it's important to maximize at least what you can control with cortisol, because cortisol, even though I've called it enemy number one when it comes to fat loss and hormone dysfunction, especially, we do need it. So you can't just make it go away. I think they did research, um, and the research showed like when cortisol was super, super low, like fat loss hardly happened at all. So, I mean, you need cortisol for a lot of different functions in the body. But what we want to avoid is chronically high cortisol. And here's the thing people need to remember: when you diet, now you're operating at a deficit. Your body is going to be under recovered. That's the thing. And that's why it's key to have a high carb day in there once a week, which we'll get into. I know I keep alluding to that. But you need a day to kind of drop that cortisol. If not, you've got 7 days of chronically high cortisol because you're eating less than your body needs. You're under recovered, even though you're eating high enough protein. So what happens is cortisol stays chronically high. You start making less thyroid hormone. You make less testosterone. You make less progesterone for females, which interrupts your sleep, right? chronically high cortisol not only hits those hormones and slows your metabolism down, it also plays a role with sleep. Your sleep's not going to be as good. So guess what? Now you're more under recovered, which makes cortisol go higher, which slows your metabolic rate more, which hits your hormones more. You see the vicious cycle. So that's why I think, we'll talk about the lifestyle stuff that we need to address with sleep and stuff from a supplement standpoint, which is the last standpoint, by the way. The supplements are a tiny portion of what to have. But that's why, from a supplement standpoint, I like to recommend New Ethics Cordy's 2 caps before bed to help drop cortisol as much as we can, from a supplement standpoint, and hormone optimizer, which drops cortisol and it also boosts testosterone. So, those are the two things that when I have people dieting, they make a big, big difference. But we have to do the things to mitigate, chronically high cortisol, which, some of these things we'll talk about.
Awesome. Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, especially with general population, I like to go over a few questions first. I think with competitors, it's a little bit different because we assume most of them are given, or they're so self-aware that they would mention that as well. But some of the first things I always like to address is, how consistent were you really over the last week or two? Was there anything different in the sense of maybe you had travel days, maybe actually there were a few extra bites and licks and whatever that you didn't account for? And like you said, was there more stress in general or less sleep? Because again, like with the high cortisol, we're automatically going to hold on to A, more body fat, and B, sometimes a bit more water, etc. And that's both reasons for the scale to be staying up. Or other things like how well did you adhere to the plan, really, if you have a meal plan, or how quote unquote clean was your diet? Was it a lot more processed foods than usual? Even if it was the same calories, we know that there's more potential for error if we have more foods that have barcodes. So even if you're tracking meticulously, or even things like I've had a client, she ate 2 packets of gum that she didn't track, those kind of things. So like let's look at all the small little things, because these need to be addressed first before we're changing anything with calories or macros. Do you kind of go over a similar checklist with your clients?
I do. I have the scale, 1 to 10 scale, that I ask my clients when I start to see and sniff out a plateau. And typically they're seeing it too. They're like, hey, like my weight's not moving. I have a system of questions I ask. And the first one that I ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing nailing your diet and macros? So for Gen Pop, if they're dieting and you've hired me and you spent the money and we're trying to go all in, I want them at a 9 out of 10. That's not too much to ask. Because here's the thing, if you're stepping on stage, it's a 10 out of 10. It's literally the food that you prepare. And this is a sacrifice people make to get on stage. There's no balance for something like that because it's an extreme outcome, right? You can manage some balance, but when it comes to nailing your macros, it better be a 10 out of 10. And I don't let my clients eat out and track their food, because the room for error, especially towards the end when body fat loss is so hard because your body is fighting you. It does not want to be that lean. You can't go out and eat. Like, you've got to prepare your food, and the quote unquote cleaner, more from the ground, the better, or the less processed, the better, or the less ingredients, the better, because you just know the room for error is not as high, right? You can eat a lot of packaged stuff, but there's a 20 to 25%, whatever the FDA allows, for a variance. So, instead of 30 carbs, you might be eating 40, for example. Like, you just don't know. So that's what I do. Scale 1 to 10. And if it's not where I want it, I don't change the plan. I say, hey, I need you to tighten that 7 up to a 9 if you're Gen Pop. Tighten it up, plan your food out, have it with you that day, and don't eat off the plan. That's always the thing. And that usually gets people to dropping. And I look at that week's history leading up, if they've been dropping for the past 3 or 4 weeks, and unless they've dropped a lot of weight, that's the other thing. I know it's probably time if they've dropped 10 pounds or more, because their body's starting to adapt, like I talked about earlier. But if they've dropped 4 pounds and they're not dropping after week 4, I probably don't need to adjust the plan. We got to find a way to tighten the reins a little bit.
Agreed, absolutely. And yeah, I think stress is really something along that list that people totally underestimate in the sense of how much it can oppose their weight loss or cause them to plateau a little bit. And yeah, even sleep, I guess, plays into that as well, or even just hormonal things as well. But I like that bumping it up, or like that scale of 1 to 10. That's really helpful. So people can also learn to honestly look at their own effort. So where would you go? Where do you go next? Let's say that all of these things are kind of like a check in the box. No, I was completely consistent. I was being accurate. I followed the plan. I ate pretty clean. Nothing was different in terms of stress or travel or sleep. Um, how big of a change, if we can even generalize that, do you make? And is it more from carbs or fats or both? Or yeah.
Yeah, I want to get into that, and I'm sorry, I'm going to back up because I do want to explain the stress component. The other things that I do try and find out that could be hormonal, and this is where I've given a whole lecture and done multiple podcasts on this. It's hormones versus calories in, calories out, and why hormones can impact calories in, calories out. So here's how I can actually see the issue. All right. If someone's very stressed, right? Maybe they're going through a divorce, maybe, besides a divorce or a bad breakup or something like that, or stress at home, stress at work, just very, very high stress. And a lot of type A people, they're very high stress type people. If they get out of the routine, it stresses them out. So, outside of looking at a 4-point cortisol test, you can ask questions and find out how stressed someone is, and I can read it in their emails. There's lots of exclamation points. There's a lot of freaking out. There's a lot of over analysis. Like there's a lot of that. And I know some of my clients are smiling and laughing. Maybe some of them are pissed off. Like, is he calling me out? Because here's the thing: those types of stressed people. Here's why stress plateaus everyone. When your stress goes up, two things happen. Your blood sugar does stay a little bit higher than normal, because when stress goes up, it makes you pump out more blood sugar, which it's trying to say, hey, here's some energy, blood sugar, run or go, like run from the tiger or run from the person breaking into your house, whatever. It's a stress level. So as your blood glucose goes up, now you're burning through more blood glucose. But to get your blood glucose back down to normal ranges, insulin has to go up to help drive the blood glucose down. And insulin is very interesting because it blocks fat burning to a very large degree. It blocks using other forms of fuel in your body as energy, right? Especially fat. So as your blood sugar goes up from cortisol, the insulin has to go up to drive that down. Now you're in a state to where if you've been dropping well on, say, 1,600 calories, but all of a sudden you have a week from hell at work and you're on low sleep and you might be getting fired or whatever the reason is, right? We've all got our shit. Now you're fighting through higher insulin, higher blood sugar. Now imagine if it's like that for months, for months. Now you start to see where to actually get through that, you have to drop their calories even lower than you would have. So somebody that should be dropping on 1,600, I've seen them to where maybe I have to get them down to 1,300, for example, because of the hormonal component. And that's why every researcher, every quote unquote influencer out there that says it's not calories in, calories out versus hormones, it's not that, it's because you're cheating on your diet. They don't understand the systems of the body. And that is how cortisol can impact things. So that I want people to understand that, because I know we have people listening, coaches, or maybe they're just people that are trying to diet. And they're like, listen, John, I'm doing everything right. Everything right. They're fighting through some kind of a stress response is what I've seen most of the time. And how to fix that? You got to lower your stress. Like that's it. Like maybe you need to take a week off from the gym and you need to sleep in and you need to nail your diet. And by the way, when that happens, we'll talk about, diet breaks and things like that here in just a bit. When that happens, I see people's weight just start flying off of them. So you do the opposite of what people think, but we'll get to that.
Exactly. And like sometimes you see clients go on vacation even, and they might even think they're overindulging, and then they come back and they're lighter than before because of all the stress being let go. Or as you said, like sometimes it's things like financial struggles, or once you get through a breakup and then all the weight comes off because you're truly like you're literally letting go of something. So yeah, I like that you really clarified that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so where are we going from here when it comes to what do we actually adjust? Training,
Yeah.
nutrition, both, carbs, fats.
Yeah. Typically, what I like to do is if I can, I like to adjust. Most of the time, I've got someone's protein set. I rarely ever adjust protein. I just leave it set for the off season, for dieting. It's just simple, leave it set where it's at. It's not a fuel source unless it's too high. If it's way, way too high, which isn't going to happen often, but if you're dieting and your protein's sky high and you're starting to run low on carbs and fats, you will start to convert over protein into glucose. It's not an efficient process, but it will happen. So that's the only time I've ever seen high protein interfere with fat loss is when you're running low on carbs and fats. You will turn that over. So with that being said, protein set, I like to try and set fat because I don't like to play with that number very often. I like to keep it there for hormone purposes to help slow down some of the carbs that we eat so you have a decent glucose response. Because lower fat and a little bit more carbs, you see a lot of people, their glucose can actually get low because they burn through the carbs so fast. So I like to, for example, I like to have, maybe women are set at 60 fat a day, maybe guys are set at 70 or somewhere in that range. I will get a little lower towards the end, but typically I'm adjusting carbohydrates because they're the ones that cause the insulin response. They're the ones that, as you lower them, you improve your insulin sensitivity and fat loss becomes easier for the most part. Um, so I typically like to adjust carbs and not add very much cardio. And here's the reason why I don't add much cardio. Your body has to recover from that. So remember, I'm always trying to balance how beat down your body gets. So if you're someone that's jogging 4 days a week for cardio, I don't want to add to where now you're at 7 days a week because it's it's something that you have to recover from. Versus if I just drop your calories some, it's not causing more damage on the legs, right? It's not causing more inflammation. It's not causing more that your protein is going to have to help you recover from. We want the training to do that. With that being said, cardio is a component. So sometimes I'll add 5 minutes of cardio, but I usually start people so low anyway. It doesn't get too high at the end. So, man, I know I'm going way off in the weeds here, but here's an idea of what I start someone with. If they've not been doing any cardio, I'll start them with 15 minutes of steady state, 3 days a week, for example, and maybe one hit session of 5 hit, and that's it, which takes 5 minutes. If they plateau, I typically will drop carbs, 20 to 25 carbs, which is 80 to 100 calories, and I'll add 5 minutes to their steady state cardio session. Maybe one hit, so maybe from 5 to 6. And that's if everything's perfect and I know it's time to adjust to break the plateau. So typically 20 to 25 carbs. Now, the times that will be higher is if someone's dieting on pretty high calories. So if I have a female that is eating 2,700 calories in the off season, I can't just drop her 20 carbs. Like I need to drop her a couple hundred calories, right? So it's probably going to be more than that. But typically for most people, we're on poverty macros towards the end. If I've got a female going from 1,500, I need to get her down probably to 1,400. I'm going to drop about 25 carbs. That's 100 calories and add 5 minutes of cardio because the steady state cardio your body adapts to very quickly. After about 3 to 4 weeks, your body's used to the walks on the treadmill or riding the bike or whatever you're doing. So I like to adjust that by about 5 minutes seems to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I'm definitely 100% on board with the carb manipulation there when it comes to how many you're dropping or how much you're dropping. In terms of cardio, I would agree with that. Also, just meeting people where they are. If someone generally says, "Wow, my calories are already so low, but I have so much time throughout my day, I'd much rather add more calorie expenditure in the form of exercise than dropping my
Yeah,
calories." Meeting them halfway or meeting them there and just saying like that's absolutely fine, or vice versa. If someone says I have zero additional time to give, I already feel like my energy is so low, that would be the last place where I would add extra energy expenditure. So
good point.
um but generally for you, does that differ between Gen Pop and competitors? I guess maybe in the severity of the adjustment or yeah.
Yeah, the severity of the adjustment and how low I'm willing to take someone. right?
Mhm.
So there are females, I may need to get them down to 1,000 calories or 1,100 calories towards the very end if they're stepping on stage, because that's what it takes. If I'm trying to help a female lose 30 pounds, there's no way in hell I'm getting her down to 1,000 calories. One, they're not going to be lean to step on stage. And two, that's the point to where the only types of people that can stick to 1,000 calories a day for an extended period of time are the people that are trying to get on stage, because you're so driven to get on stage. You understand, like, you're literally going through starvation to get on stage. If you're just doing it to diet, most people can't stick to 1,000 calories. So what I've seen happen is then you see people eating off the plan. Like, they just get so ravenously hungry that they go and they just binge eat, and then that throws things off. That to me means it's time to change the plan. It's time.
Mm.
You should never get that low for Gen Pop. Guys, I don't like to get guys Gen Pop down below 1,800 if I can help it, unless there are smaller individuals, smaller guys, under 170 pounds. I don't mind that for a small, but it's only for a short amount of time. But the severity is how low I'll take somebody based on the goal. And the other thing too is the drops. The drops are pretty much the same for most people. Guys, I might have to drop 30, 35 carbs. If I ever do have to drop fats, I usually drop around 10 fats. That's 90 calories. But it's more about just systematically lowering and adding cardio. It just becomes harder the leaner people get. Stalls happen more, cortisol's higher. Your body's like, hey, I am not you're not doing this. Like, I'm going to preserve fat, right? And it's trying to protect itself. So that's the difference between Gen Pop and bodybuilding.
Nice. And yeah, you said already here within this that there's a certain point at which you say, okay, this is enough. We've dieted for long enough. We need to
Mm.
first, the calories are too low. And that's exactly what I want to talk about next. Like, what are some indicators where we're like, this weight loss plateau indicates we need to either have a longer diet break or just completely go into maintenance for, start a reverse diet and go into maintenance for a while. So yeah, you mentioned the low calories, and what would be some other indicators where you'd be like, I'm gonna pull this person out of the deficit?
Yeah, the first thing is just how burnt out they're getting and how many times they're going to eat off plan. They're having
Mhm.
slip ups. They'll report slip ups to me. And I tell my clients, I'm like, hey, just tell me, like, when it happens. I'm not going to yell at you. I need to know that stuff because I need to know what to do next. All right. Sometimes it's a motivational email and it's me sticking my foot in their ass because they respond well to that. And I'm like, hey, listen, like, I've got a lady that I've been working with, and we've been floating around the 200 mark, and she's dropped a lot of weight, and she'll dip down to the 190s. But then on the weekends, she's not getting her sleep. She's eating out. It's always something, and she knows it. And it's constantly me sending emails like, "Hey, like, let's go. Let's get you into the 190s. Like, let's, and then we'll add calories." Sometimes it's those kind of emails, but most of the time it's finding that point of, okay, hey, we need to take a break. And that becomes hard because most people are so scared to start adding food back in because they're already struggling and they're eating off plan. But I have to explain to them, hey, listen, there's two things we can do. We can add the food back in and we can continue fat loss. So if someone is literally a 9 out of 10 on their diet and I systematically reverse diet and add food in, we talked a little bit about this on the prior episode, they can keep dropping. And the reason that happens is cortisol starts to drop. They're more recovered. Their sleep's better. Their metabolic rate starts to increase. Hormones improve, and they get leaner and they drop weight. I've done it with multiple people. It all comes down to how well they stick to the plan, and that helps them not have episodes where they eat off the plan because they start eating more. I just tell
Yeah.
them like, hey, I need you to eat damn near perfect because I can get your calories up really fast. You're going to be eating more soon. Like, I just need you to be very strict. So that's I know I keep going off into the weeds, but I love this topic. That's really, everything that I
I
think
think
is
that
important.
that honest communication between coach and client obviously is so important, and just even being honest with yourself, because like you said, we probably have the feeling of like, oh, I failed if that happens over and over again, and you kind of like, your coach usually is someone that you don't want to disappoint, that you want to impress as well. So if you keep going off plan, then you feel disappointed in yourself and your efforts, and you're like, no, no, I can do this, I can do this. But like you said, often it's just about having that honest conversation. And just like that, as if we're in a situation, we have a hard time assessing our stress again. So sometimes when it comes to determining should we continue with this or not, I also like to ask what's coming up in the next few weeks, because are you really able to put your foot down for another month, 2 months, or 3 months or whatever? And if they're then like, yeah, actually I have literally nothing planned, I truly feel like I'm really focused now. Okay, cool, let's keep going. But if they say, well, I have a big deadline in 2 weeks, and then actually my mother-in-law is coming to stay for a week, and then we're going on vacation, and then it's Christmas, and then it's this, and actually I already feel overwhelmed. I'm like, whoa, okay, cool. This is a really good sign. We should really take a diet break or go into maintenance, whatever. Yeah, I think that that's quite important to kind of think about as well.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, and then what I wanted to touch on also is, aside from obviously the caloric adjustment, the making sure we're super consistent, accurate, etc., what would be some additional quote unquote hacks or tips to implement to speed things back up, I guess, or even to prevent stall from happening in the first place?
Yeah, glucose disposal agents, that's a supplement that I think for fat loss, everyone should take over the counter. We make one that has 500 milligrams of berberine, which is basically poor man's metformin. In the bodybuilding world, you'll see a lot of people get a script for metformin. It's extremely cheap. It's not something I think anyone here needs to worry about. Now, I'm not telling you go get black market metformin, but if you are somebody that's pre-diabetic, you have a history, and your doctor wants to give you a script for metformin, 500 milligrams morning and night work really, really well at improving insulin sensitivity and freeing up more fatty acids to be used as fuel, right? So that's a hack. That's from the medical standpoint. Like I said, that's between you and your doctor. But on our end, right, if you don't have a prescription, you can use a glucose disposal agent. And that's why we selected berberine as our main ingredient at 500 milligrams. And you take that with carb meals that have 20 carbs or more. And what it does is berberine is interesting because it when you take it, it kind of tricks your body into thinking it's low on fuel. So then you start pushing fats into the mitochondria being used as fuel. So there are supplements like that. It also helps insulin do its job better. So you have less insulin floating around your bloodstream. Remember what I said earlier about insulin can block fat burning to some degree. Now you use a GDA, so your body secretes less insulin to do the job because you've got the GDA in your bloodstream helping lower blood glucose and storage and things of that nature. Carnitine is a very, very interesting product. We have a powdered carnitine. It's 2 grams. I recommend that once in the morning and once in the evening. It's not a stimulant. There's liposomal L-carnitine that we carry as well from New Ethics. You can even do injectable L-carnitine. That I don't recommend because one, it's not tested. You don't know exactly. You don't have COAs on that kind of stuff. These labs show up here and there and they go under. I mean, that's just old school bodybuilding bullshit that it does work, but you just don't know what you're getting. And I know there's a lot of people that are like, well, hey, you recommended that years ago. I do. I just don't trust that you're getting what you're paying for because you have no way of knowing. So that and it hurts like hell. Like the injections hurt like hell. I mean, they are brutal. But if you do have that and you're somebody that likes it, 600 milligrams before you work out and 600 milligrams at some other time of the day, it does do wonders if everything you have is good. But like I said, I try to stay away from that. It's just kind of sketchy. So those are a couple of supplements that I like to use as hacks. Carnitine twice a day. Now you have to be careful with carnitine because you need 2,000 milligrams, sorry, to really get the benefits because it's very hard to digest. And if you start going over that in one serving, it will act as a laxative. So in the medical community, high doses of carnitine powder can act as a laxative. So if you're backed up, by the way, you can do that. You can double it up and it will help get your digestion back on track. But you have to kind of skirt that line and that's why it's you see a lot of people that do and don't use it. Just try the liposomal L-carnitine a couple times a day. So those are my supplement hacks there.
Nice. Yeah, I like, I mean, along the lines of better blood sugar management, etc. I like recommending post-meal walks. I think
Mm.
just to it gets the keeps the gut digestion going, and aside from that, it like helps obviously with blood sugar management. That's one of my favorite ones where I'm saying, okay, are you basically sitting all day and just getting your training and your walk in one go, or can we kind of split this up and at least go for a short walk after your meals or work on a standing desk or something like that?
You know, you mentioned NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. For people listening, as we diet, especially as you diet for a show, you do have less and less energy because you're taking in less and less food, right? And your body's under recovered for certain, the longer you go, the more you'll feel that you stop doing the things that you normally do, whether it's just fidgeting, whether it's just movement. Like we all, any of us that have dieted for a show, we want to sit on the couch and just chill out and watch some TV at the end of the day. You don't want to mow the yard like normal. You don't want to have sex like normal. You don't want to just do all the things, right, that are normal every parts of everyday life. The reason I bring that up is keep a close eye on that. It's not just about step count. If you find yourself just wanting to veg out, you're going to not be burning as many calories as you have been. So try and keep your NEAT up to normal and be very aware of it.
I like that. Yeah, that's a very good point. And that's why I mean I'm generally not someone who likes to track energy burned or calories burned during a
Yeah.
workout. I don't think there's any purpose to that. But yeah, tracking steps, I do think that that in and of itself is one good starting point. You said something about preventing fat loss plateaus earlier, or actually that we can't prevent them because our body is set up that way, and that's good. But are there ways that we can kind of push them out or see that we can prevent them as best as possible?
Yeah, doing refeeds at least once a week or a high carb day. I don't like to really see people do free meals when they're dieting because listen, if you tell somebody a free meal, that's up for debate on what's a free meal, right? Like a burger and fries, or is someone getting this giant burger, giant fries, a milkshake with it? You know what I mean? And then usually that shit spills over into a couple hours later. They're like, well, I've already had it. I may as well just keep eating other shit at home. I like to have systematic high carb days when you're dieting because you're just more accurate that way. But here's the science behind it. For years, we did massive refeeds, and people have done high carb days refeeds, for a long, long time, with the idea that it would spike your metabolism, it would help propel fat loss for the week. And we did such crazy stuff back in the day. I'd have people eating 2,000 carbs on a Tuesday. I'm not even kidding, and
Oh,
still getting shredded. Now, of course, that you post about and you see all these people that I was doing it with, and they would step on stage. But what you didn't see behind the scenes is I had a lot of people wanting to hire me at the time. They're like, "Hey, I want to be a fat kid once a week and be able to still get shredded." But what they didn't see is the people that it was two steps forward, two steps back. And those big, big
Mhm.
refeeds, they hindered fat loss. So what happened is Dr. Bill Campbell, I was invited to speak at the ISSN annual conference, huge honor of mine. And we sat down and had dinner, and he said, "Hey, I want to do a refeed study. Or would you like to write the diets for that?" And I said, "I would be honored." You're coming from someone that was a high school dropout at one point. Like for me to be able to write the diets for a study are a big deal. So what we did was it was a whole team of us. They basically studied doing refeeds back to back days during the week or just dieting with zero refeeds. All right. And what they found was um, refeeds did not impact fat loss as far as hindering it at all. People were able to stick to their diet because they had a couple high carb days to enjoy. They held on to their muscle better. And I can't remember the difference in fat loss. And that's bad because I was part of this, but I'm old and it's been 6 years since that conversation. The fat loss was either as good or better. And it makes sense, right? The thing is, when you eat carbohydrates, it boosts leptin. So if you have a refeed that's not too big, you're going to boost leptin. What leptin does, it also stimulates your metabolism. So you do get a little bit of metabolic effects. You know, for how long we used to think, hey, you do these giant refeeds on a Sunday, it's going to help fuel your metabolism for the whole week. No, not really. It's really going to help do things like drop cortisol. boost your metabolism a little bit for a couple few days. And it's going to give you that extra energy because now you have extra stored carbs to help push you through those workouts. So your workouts are going to be better. You're going to burn more calories that way. Your cardio is going to be better. Cortisol is going to be lower. And it's one of those things, if you're dieting without that, your body adapts to the same calories over time, and you're not spiking your metabolism at all. You're just keeping it hammered down. So I know people are listening, they're like, well, okay, how do I know how many carbs to have in my high carb day? Just a general rule of thumb, because there's outliers everywhere. If you add, whatever you're dieting on, you're losing a pound or 2 pounds a week, add 100 to 200 carbs and do that once a week. So for most females, if I've got them dieting on 150 carbs, maybe they do anywhere from 50 to 100 extra once a week, and they may do 200 to 250 as their high carb day, right? And that's a day to where I'm not really worried about fat loss that day. I'm worried about getting close to maintenance, resetting all those things that I talked about, and giving them energy for the week ahead because it's going to help prevent stalls. It just does. For guys, maybe, if I'm dieting them on 200 carbs a day to start, maybe they've got a 400 carb day every Sunday, and I have them train on those days. So it's one of those things that they become very, very important. And now the research is there to support it.
Awesome. I love that. I think that's really a really practical takeaway. And I think in general, I hope we have painted a pretty good picture as to what to do when we hit a weight loss plateau, which is inevitable. And that, in my opinion, or you also said that that is why people should have a coach, because otherwise a set of macros that you get of the internet would just work forever and ever and ever. And you
Right.
wouldn't, it might be super aggressive, it might not be, whatever, but yeah, having that person, of course, for accountability, and B, just to take a look at everything and saying, is it time to adjust something? Are you actually consistent enough? If so, what adjustment are we making? Are we doing that through cardio, through carbs, through a mixture of both or not? How can we help additionally with any supplements and lifestyle practices? How can we manage your stress better, etc.? Yeah, I think that that's really what it's all about. And when people just think, oh, I'm doing whatever I've been doing and why is it not working anymore? I think you explained that really, really well also, that your body is just set up that way and that is good that way. That totally makes sense from a nature perspective.
Let's hit on one more thing because I know that we've got people listening that they've been deep in a diet or they're deep in a diet right now. And there's a spot for diet breaks. And let me explain this. First of all, refeeds, high carb days, those are mini diet breaks once a week. I like to think of it 6 days fat loss, 1 day of maintenance. It's a diet break for 1 day. But there are times to where I've had to take people and do a complete diet break for a whole week, for example. And the situations I see is when cortisol is very, very high, their calories are low, their cardio is high. So we see this more so with somebody's dieting to get very, very lean, and it's towards the end. I remember the first time I did it, probably like 10 years ago or so, I had a female dieting to get on stage to figure she was, upper 40s, pushing 50 years old. Um, she could eat a lot of food in the off season, but I had to get her really low to get her shredded. So she's down to 1,200 calories. She's doing an hour cardio a day, and her body was just not reacting to anything. It just was not. And actually, her weight slowly went up. And I talked to her personally. I know she was eating perfect on the plan. Like she showed me her food. Like she was very like, hey, like I'm perfect. Well, what she needed was we got to that point where the body is like, hey, unless you do something very drastic, and by the way, she's a natural competitor. So I don't like to drop the bottom out and do 500-calorie days spread out in the week. Like those are fine, but it's better for people that are assisted because you have the anabolics to help hold on to the muscle. You do that to a natural female that's already getting really lean towards the end, they're going to strip muscle left and right, which is not the look we want. So what happens is you do the opposite of what everybody else does, which drop the bottom out and you do a diet break. So what I did was I pulled all of her cardio, 100%, and it's an hour a day, and people freak out. They're like, "Oh my God, I'm going to gain weight." No, you're going to drop a shit ton of cortisol because now your body doesn't have to recover. Your legs don't have to recover
Mhm.
from an hour of cardio 7 days a week that you've been doing for a long time. So inflammation, boom, it drops. Cortisol, boom, it drops. And then I add carbs, not an amount that's going to make them gain fat. Because you got to remember, eating 1,200 calories towards the end. Your insulin sensitivity is great because you're lean. So if you add in, say, 40 carbs a day, I'm just throwing a number out. 40 carbs is 160 calories. Now she's up to 1,360 calories and doing zero cardio. What do you think is going to happen? Cortisol continues to drop. You're going to feel better. Her weight and her body just started responding. She started dropping
Oh,
like crazy. She
amazing.
dropped 4 pounds in a week by
Wow.
raising, yeah, and it's a diet break, right? It's systematically working with what the body needs at that time because our body is smarter than us. It doesn't give a shit if you want to be lean. It's like, hey, I need you to survive. If you're female, it's like, hey, I need you to be healthy so you can make babies. Like there's all these things our bodies are meant for that's not meant. No, it doesn't give a shit about getting on stage. That's where diet breaks work. And a lot of people like they plan their diet breaks, and that's okay. I just like to save them for when you really need them. Um, and that's if people want to implement those. I don't think we've done a deep dive on those, Lisa. Maybe we should do a deep dive on those, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Okay. Yeah, I love that story of your client because I think it really paints a picture that everyone is so individual and every case is so individual, and you really have to assess their circumstances, how long they've been dieting, how well they're adhering, and all of that. So, yeah, I hope we kind of gave people a good takeaway for what to do when they hit a fat loss plateau. Do you have anything else you want to touch on before I announce what we're going to talk on in the next episode?
No, I just want to tell people that we appreciate you. Send us a message. Our email, all of our contact information is in the show notes. If you would just hit pause real quick, guys. Leave us a review. There's up to 1 to 5 stars. We've got a lot of 5 stars review. It just takes a second. Just please hit pause. Leave us that review real quick. I don't even think you have to type anything. I think you just hit the stars and submit it. So it really helps us out with the algorithms and we want to get this content out to as many people as we can. Like we don't charge for it. This is a labor of love, right? So if you would just do that and let us know if you have a guest that you want to hear on, a topic you want to hear, if you want to send questions, you can be anonymous. We can shout you out, whatever you guys need. So what do we have coming up next?
Awesome. Yeah, and of course, in the next episode, we'll have a Q&A, but or a question of the week rather. But then in our next topic episode, we're going to talk about how to set up a diet in stages, specifically for the obese. I think that heading into the new year, I think that that'll be really, really good because you and your coaching team have some amazing strategies when it comes to specific periodization that just goes beyond the typical, okay, we're just, diet phase, reverse diet, maintenance, etc. You've shared previously how you sometimes, or what you personally have done with your, few weeks of more like Matador style, I guess, dieting in that sense, or few weeks aggressive, few weeks higher, etc. So I'm excited
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. We appreciate you all. Please leave those reviews. Hit us up. We'll see you on the next episode.